I have more than one reason to be delighted to be present here today. One is I believe I have some competition. There is another event going on in the hotel to felicitate a distinguished parliamentarian. And I understand that among the invitees are some of Kerala's great film personalities. So the fact that so very few have turned up to listen to something as boring as politics is something I welcome very much. Quite apart from that, I'm truly happy, pleased that I join a series of distinguished individuals who have taken the floor on this call. And I think this is an opportunity for me to try not to cover the ground that has been covered for the past several weeks. I think we've had a cascade of comments on 1 year of the NDA government, 1 year with Narendra Modi in office. And honestly, there is precious little new that you can say, because whether it is in the newspapers and news magazines, and of course on TV channels where the anchors want the nation to know this and the nation to know that, I think we've more or less exhausted the subject. So what I plan to do is perhaps try and shed some light on an issue that merits, in my view, more attention than it has received so far. And that issue is how Prime Minister Narendra Modi has conducted himself vis-a-vis the organs or the institutions of governance in the country. Because that is something that we will have to deal with during the rest of this term. And I'd like to spend, therefore, much of my time talking to you about how he has dealt with the cabinet system, with parliament, with the judiciary, etc., etc. And then try and draw some broad conclusions from that. But let me begin with some broad general observations. None in this country has quite the same self-awareness and sense of mission epitomized in the way he speaks of himself in the third person. He thinks he has a providential mission to fulfill. His identification with his country is so intense that he sees himself and the country as one. A stable regime is to be established by an extraordinary mixture of vision, stubbornness, chutzpah, political acumen, and love. The country's pride in itself, its intransigence, its historical and cultural heritage, alongside its charm and diplomatic skill, these traits and contradictions are all to be found in the man whose personalization of patriotism can sometimes border on the irrational. He is profoundly attached to traditional values, but he is also a prophet of modernization. He expounds grand principles and likes to appear as a leader set on a single, unwavering course. A ruthless, calculating politician, he is a complete realist in all things, remorselessly applying cold logic. A strict disciplinarian, he demands complete loyalty from those around him, but he gives little in return. He is of the firm opinion that a statesman should not have friends because he will favor them and won't overlook their weaknesses. He is a master of improvisation, of courting danger and springing surprises, making a fetish of secrecy. He takes a visceral delight in defeating opponents. He is comfortable with power, deploying it with a natural assurance. It has been said of him that his performance is breathtaking, at times eloquent, at other times coldly pragmatic, but at all times articulate. He is not always right, but he is always certain. His achievements, personally frugal and scrupulous, he is not at home in the social world of the capital. He has a taste not for the country's classical culture, but for non-literary popular culture. His achievements come often at a cost. creating lasting enmities, suspicions, and interrogations. Is he a great statesman or a conjurer on a huge scale? Does he have lessons for the world, or is he a wizard of Oz manipulating a giant machine of illusions? These observations, ladies and gentlemen, are about General de Gaulle, taken from Jonathan Femble's magisterial biography of the great French leader, liberator of his country from German occupation during the Second World War, and founder of France's Fifth Republic. I have merely changed the tense found in the original text, from the past tense to the present tense. And I've done that not in the least to put Narendra Modi on the same pedestal as de Gaulle. Such a comparison would indeed be odious, but to highlight the promises and perils of leaders who equate a change of government with a change of a regime. The circumstances in which both de Gaulle and he came to power were very different. Many political parties, backed by powerful army generals, invited de Gaulle to take over the reins of the country in 1958. Modi was elected in a free election. The conditions in which they came to power were different as well. The fractious political class of France was unable to confront the serious issues facing the country, including especially the civil war in Algeria. French institutions of governance were all but paralyzed. Now, none of this was true of India when Modi was elected. So my simple point is this: the 2014 general elections did not lead only to a change of government. It also led to changing the tone and the temper of ruling India that have prevailed right since our independence. Unlike in France, this latter change did not involve a formal redistribution of power between the organs of governance. What is involved is the beginning of an attempt to revamp the ideological underpinnings of the Indian Republic, and by that token to tamper with the delicate balance of powers between the executive on the one hand and the legislature, judiciary, media and civil society on the other. Am I going too fast? Are you alright? Okay. Such an attempt was made before, once, in June 1975, when Indira Gandhi imposed a state of emergency. It gave India the first taste of authoritarian rule since the country attained freedom from British colonial rule. Democratic governance was paralyzed, liberties of citizens were suspended, Parliament ceased to function in all but the name. The bureaucracy, like the judiciary, had to be quote-unquote committed, that is, act according to the whims of the powers that be. The press was shackled, and of course, the trains ran on time. Indira Gandhi kept what I would like to call the hardware of democracy intact. By hardware, one means parliament functioning, judiciary functioning, civil service functioning. But she very nearly destroyed the software of Indian democracy. Nothing, I think, would be more sacrilegious, more misleading than to compare the mercifully short-lived emergency regime to what our country has experienced in the past 1 year. But it would be equally foolish not to note the emerging trends that portend the advent of a government that is more muscular, more personality-centric, and more determined to push an agenda that has so far been alien to a widely shared idea of India. In that respect, I think Narendra Modi is closer to three personalities who have emerged in a big way on the international scene during the past few years. One is Erdogan of Turkey, the other is Putin of Russia, and the third is Abe of Japan. All three have recast nationalism in a completely different avatar. Among the mantras, you will recall that Narendra Modi chanted throughout his high-profile election campaign, there is one that took precedence over all others. He called for a Congress Mukt Bharat. What he obviously had in mind was to end once and for all the dominant role of the Nehru-Gandhi family over politics that has lasted for a greater part of post-independence India's politics. That domination, in Mr. Modi's eyes, accounted for all the major ills afflicting the nation. Niggardly economic growth, pervasive corruption, social unrest, atrophy of institutions, failure to modernize the armed forces, lack of firm leadership, and a robust sense of direction, relations with the outside world in a state of disrepair, and so on and so forth. But none of the above, I think, mattered more to Narendra Modi and his Sangh Parivar as the Nehru-Gandhi family's vote bank politics. That, of course, was a synonym for the so-called appeasement of minorities that enabled not just the Congress, but all parties who swore by secularism to survive and thrive in electoral politics. And this at the expense, or so we said, of the majority community. In his election campaign, Modi's direct references to majoritarian views were few and far between. But the majoritarian conceit that did lurk behind his other mantras, notably Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, and even less government, more governance. Before I discuss how all this has worked out in the 1 year that Modi has been in office, let me pause to mention, even if it is in passing, that parties opposed to the BJP and left and liberal opinion failed dismally to grasp the mood of the electorate. Modi's development mantra, his hype about the success of the Gujarat model, the emphasis on job creation, his lament about inflation caught the imagination of voters, especially young voters, as much as the denunciation of scams and scandals. During the UPA rule. Add to this the way he cultivated his own persona, the frequent allusions to his modest family background, the provincials' offensive against the conceits of the metropolis, the grit of an alleged parvenu, a Johnny-come-lately, pitted against the conceits or smugness of the party's patricians, the austere demeanor of the RSS Pracharak that stood in sharp contrast to the smooth socialite indulgences of the well-heeled in the capital. All of this, his opponents reckoned, would not take Modi far given his conduct during the Gujarat communal riots and his self-proclaimed Hindu nationalist credentials. The opponents proved to be disastrously wrong. Modi first tided over internal resistance to name him as the BJP's prime ministerial candidate. And he confounded all his adversaries when the party won a majority of its own in the Lok Sabha, something not witnessed since 1984. Few, if any, of his critics in the political class and in liberal opinion have candidly appraised the reasons why they failed to read the writing on the wall. So, how has Modi fared? How has he proceeded to realize his goals and ambitions in these past 12 months? Let me briefly talk about the way he has conducted himself as regards his own party. To begin with, he moved quickly to establish his supremacy in the BJP. Veterans to whom he would have had to show deference were sidelined. L.K. Advani, in particular, was made to eat the humble pie again and again and again. He was placed on the pedestal of a mentor, a Bhishma Pitamaha, but was deprived of all authority. Modi also ensured that his closest confidant, Amit Shah, was made party president, despite the latter's unsavory reputation of using strong arm methods to neutralize quote-unquote so-called enemies back in his home state of Gujarat. What mattered to Modi was Shah's uncommon organizational talents and his robust understanding of how elections are fought and how elections are won. Modi could trust Shah to silence the feeblest voice of dissent in the party, to reach out to allies, and not least to calm the fears and apprehensions of the RSS bosses in Nagpur. Despite a hitch here or there, that trust has yielded excellent results. Dissent in the party is unheard of. Modi has pretty much allowed BJP chief ministers and chief ministers of allied parties a free hand in their states, but in return has ensured that they will toe his line in national affairs. And finally, he seems to have established a fairly sound relationship with the RSS. He has given the latter a say in cultural and ideological matters, but on economic and political matters, he's always had the last word. Moreover, he seems to have drawn the Rakshaman Rekha that Hindutva hotheads in his cabinet, party and the extended Parivar cannot cross. But I'll have a few more things to say on this subject a little later. Relations with the executive. The functioning of the executive under Modi also indicates the extent to which he is prepared to go to impose his authority. Not since the heyday of Indira Gandhi has the PMO exercised such overweening power. He runs it with a small group of bureaucrats, many of them who had worked with him in Gujarat. Moreover, he has reached out directly to the bureaucracy as a whole to drive home the point that his writ alone will run. The PMO has cleared every major and minor in the government. Officials who had served the earlier regime have been given short shrift. Bureaucrats have been kept on their toes, what with long working hours, timely attendance in office, instant demands for PowerPoint presentation, a strict watch on their travel schedules, and so forth. Modi's stamp is obvious on every decision the government has taken. It is he who has made these decisions public, regardless of the ministries involved. So on balance, it can be said that the bureaucracy under Modi has a tighter focus, that government actions are better streamlined than in the past. But whether this has resulted in more governance and less government is still not quite clear. With a tough, no-nonsense boss at the helm, a Babu would think several times before he makes a noting on a file that might not be in sync with the Prime Minister's thinking. What transpires during cabinet meetings is also a matter of some speculation. Candor on the part of most of his ministerial colleagues is likely to be an exception rather than the rule. They know that Modi would not be Modi if he doesn't get his way, always. Relationship with Parliament. When he entered Parliament, you will recall, for the first time, Modi touched his forehead on the step of the entrance to the building, hailed it as the temple of democracy, and proclaimed that the only book he would follow in letter and spirit would be the Constitution of India. These gestures and words seem a bit out of place given the record in Gujarat. He convened this there in that state of Gujarat. He convened the state assembly once every 6 months to meet constitutional requirements. He often got the opposition suspended from the House to facilitate the passage of certain bills. In 2009, he once got 12 laws passed in 17 minutes. Indeed, the Assembly met for 23 days throughout his tenure as Chief Minister. He has spoken little in Parliament since becoming Prime Minister. He has taken no questions. Indeed, he has spent more time addressing parliaments abroad than at home. His government has more or less ignored Parliament's standing committees. It has introduced new bills through supplementary business circulated at the 11th hour. To bypass the Rajya Sabha, where the government lacks a majority, the government has sought to amend certain laws by making them a part and parcel of finance bills. More ominous still is the attempt of the finance minister to pit the Lok Sabha, directly elected by the people, against the Rajya Sabha, whose members are indirectly elected. And he has resorted to ordinances to bypass parliamentary processes. Indeed, his very first act as Prime Minister was to appoint the Principal Private Secretary. But there were some hitches there, and the only way he could get around those hitches was by appointing the gentleman through an ordinance. The government's efforts to reach out to opposition parties in Parliament to elicit their support for one or the other bill have been weak, and they have been niggardly. Its current feud with the AAP government in Delhi threatens to land it in a constitutional quagmire. This is all the more odd given Modi's declared intent to move towards a genuinely federalized polity. He must, however, be given credit for getting a consensus on the land agreement between India and Bangladesh. His forthcoming visit to Dhaka promises to be a game changer. But this gesture must be seen in the wider context of Modi's actions towards greater federalism. He disbanded the Planning Commission, as you all know, and put in its place the Niti Aayog, which is supposed to monitor relations between the centre and the states. This mandate of the Niti Aayog is still a bit hazy. It ignores, for instance, the Interstate Council created under Article 263 of the Constitution. The Council of Chief Ministers that has been set up is hardly different from the National Development Council. The government has accepted and implemented the latest Finance Commission's recommendations regarding greater devolution of resources to the states. But this, as several experts have pointed out, has been done without taking really into account the capacity of states to raise and spend those resources. The ratio of central funding and state funding for education and public health schemes have been changed. The centre's contribution has been heavily slashed. This has especially hurt northeastern states, where the center-state ratio was 90 to 10. Overall, the devolution of resources has proved to be, in the eyes of many, including those here in Kerala, to be a curse in disguise. Let me cite a couple of examples. The demand for the scheme for the empowerment of adolescent girls was 1,476 crores. It was given 75.5 crores. The plan outlay for healthcare is supposed to be 1.2% of the GDP, when it should have in fact been 2 to 2.5% recommended by the draft National Health Policy. As regards the judiciary, the government's relations with the highest judiciary have been, to put it mildly, problematic, particularly as regards judicial appointments. The system followed so far with a large measure of success is now under stress. On this count too, the country might see a certain constitutional imbroglio unless better sense prevails. And such better sense is not in sight at the present moment. Meanwhile, there has been no move to reform the judicial mechanisms in the country to make them more efficient. To the government's credit, however, many arcane laws have been deleted from the statute books, something that has not happened for decades, despite recommendations from a large number of commissions. So far, I've discussed Modi's conduct vis-à-vis the three branches of governance: executive, legislature, judiciary. I will now briefly speak about his conduct vis-à-vis the so-called fourth estate, namely the media. After the communal riots of 2002, Modi developed an allergy for the media, especially English language TV news channels, newspapers, and news magazines. He restricted the access of journalists to the Secretariat. Media persons had to be content with press releases issued by his PRO, Mr. Jagdish Thakkar. He gave no press conferences and seldom granted interviews. Modi continued along this path during his election campaign and later when he assumed office as Prime Minister. He ignored the traditional private media and preferred instead to communicate with public opinion through the social media and the government-owned media. The few interviews he gave, largely to foreign journalists, were on the basis of questions sent in advance. There was no scope to ask him supplementary questions. He snapped the tradition of taking journalists with him on his foreign tours, and here I applaud him warmly for doing so. He also instructed his ministers to ignore media persons. The objective was clear: ensure to every extent possible that the government speaks in one voice and that communication with the public is only in one direction. Modi, it must be admitted, has had huge success with this strategy. The much despised traditional media gave him carpet coverage during the election campaign, and he has continued to receive wide coverage after becoming Prime Minister. I suppose this has something to do with large corporate groups who are well disposed towards him entering the media space in a big way. That possibility can neither be exaggerated nor dismissed out of hand. The strongest evidence that the communication strategy has worked is to be found in the latest opinion polls. Modi remains by far the most popular leader in the country, even if his popularity has dipped a little bit in the past 1 year. Given this kind of background, we probably now, in conclusion, find out to what extent all this has shaped Narendra Modi's tenure in the past 12 months. I am not competent really to discuss the pros and cons of his economic policies. All I would say is that corporate India, which backed him to the hilt, is a bit disappointed with him for not bringing about the reforms that would lend substance to his Make in India slogan. Likewise, he has encountered stiff opposition, including from those within his own Sangha Parivar, to his bills related to land acquisition, reform of labour laws, and environmental clearances. Rahul Gandhi's tirade against the suited Sarkar seems to have put the government on the defensive. A few other points will need to be noted as well. Modi has spelled out grandiose plans for infrastructure, ranging from building 100 smart cities to greater road and waterways connectivity. He has also spoken of a digitalized India. These plans doubtless carry the promise of rejuvenating the economy, provided he can create a conducive climate that encourages growth. Liberalizing the tax regime, increasing the cap on foreign investments, including in the area of insurance and so forth, has been successful to some extent. Even more significant in this regard is his appeal, I think, to the NRI community. And I'm now shifting ground, I'm moving over to his conduct with the outside world. His addresses to these NRI audiences in the US, Canada, Australia, China, and South Korea have been absolute runaway successes. Not least is the personal rapport he has been able to build with leaders of close to 20 countries he has visited so far. Time doesn't allow me to speak to you at length of what these visits have so far achieved, but there can be no denying that barring relations with Pakistan, Narendra Modi has managed to pursue a multi-aligned approach to foreign policy with great drive and vigor and with priorities clearly laid out, inviting investment to create jobs in India and enhancing India's strategic clout in international affairs. Even his harshest critics must concede that he has been able to woo rivals like America and Russia, Israel and Iran, China and Japan with consummate ease. These countries, as you know, are at odds with one another but Modi has been able to woo all of them. And I think this needed some take. This needed a very different approach than the kind of timid approach we had seen earlier. Furthermore, again barring Pakistan and more recently Afghanistan, he has cultivated tension-free relations with countries in India's neighborhood and reached out to smaller ones that could help India promote its maritime interests. The rescue of Indians stranded in Yemen and the swift response to the devastating earthquake in Nepal have certainly brought him much goodwill. His impromptu decisions to purchase 36 Rafale aircraft from France and to give e-visas to Chinese citizens demonstrate that he can go against the grain of bureaucratic caution and the caution of intelligence agencies whenever he thinks it fit to do so. Moreover, his move to invite chief ministers of states to accompany him on his foreign visits was something that was long overdue. It is he who has put this in practice. So what stands out in these endeavors is that Modi is able and eager to shed much of the baggage of the past, and that includes much of the ideological baggage of the past when he conducts his foreign policy. The forthcoming visits to Bangladesh, Israel, the Central Asian republics, and sooner or later the Gulf countries drive home the point quite vividly. In the case of Israel in particular, Modi's predecessor in office never contemplated a visit on the ground that this might irk the Muslim community. None of this would have happened had the PMO abided only by the advice of the MEA and the agencies. How far is Modi prepared to go to shed his ideological baggage when he engages with the concerns and interests of people in the country, in India? And it's trying to answer this question that will be the last part of my lecture, which, believe you me, will not last more than 3.5 minutes. He has made no bones about his long association with the RSS. He has described himself as a Hindu nationalist. He has presented copies of the Bhagavad Gita to heads of state and government during his visits abroad, with the snide remark that secularists will conduct endless debates on television on this gesture. It is another matter that television channels did not do so. He has also echoed right-wing claims, as was said by Professor Abraham a little while ago, of ancient India's great scientific achievements, including the the development of aircraft, DNA, plastic surgery, the works. Moreover, Mr. Modi hasn't uttered a word about his HRD minister's systematic efforts to saffronize textbooks, appoint little known and little respected or recognized individuals with Hindutva leanings to head various educational or research institutions, and to promote other aspects of the Hindutva agenda. Internationally acclaimed personalities like Amartya Sen and Kaporkar have been obliged to renounce their responsibilities due to the machinations of the concerned minister. But there is more. Modi's voice has not been heard on other contentious issues. The ban on beef in Maharashtra and Haryana, the ban on eggs for school children in Madhya Pradesh, the ban on anything that is critical of the Hindutva brigade, like the Ambedkar Periyar group in IIT Madras, and so forth. Incidentally, I live in Maharashtra, I live in Pune. If ever I'm caught eating beef, I will be put in prison for 5 years and will be asked to pay a fine of 5 lakhs. However, if God forbid, I have been alleged to have indulged in uncouth behavior with a lady, I will spend 3 months in jail and pay 2,000 rupees as fine. I mean, this is the kind of thing. And of course, things are infinitely worse in Haryana. Because in Haryana, if you're caught eating beef, you go to jail for 10 years. that, again, ladies and gentlemen, is one reason why I accepted with alacrity the invitation to come to Kochi. On the other hand, Mr. Modi has lately distanced himself from the anti-minority rants of some of his ministerial colleagues, his MPs, and leaders of various outfits of the Sangha Paripar. He is the one, let's not forget, who endorsed, for example, the move to form a coalition government with the PDP in Jammu and Kashmir, despite their deep ideological differences. Though the likes of RSS Supremo and Subramanian Swamy have spoken of India as a Hindu nation, he himself has taken a view and reiterated the view that conforms to the spirit of the Constitution. And that spirit does indeed celebrate India's pluralism. The pet themes of the Hindu right wing, Uniform Civil Code, Article 370, the Ram Temple in Ayodhya, have, as far as this government is concerned, been put on the back burner. So, in sum, energizing the government, stimulating economic growth, beefing up, sorry for using the word, beefing up military preparedness, reaching out to the outside world with vigor and self-confidence, overhauling social welfare schemes, emphasizing high-end technology, making life difficult for civil society organizations, keeping on hold certain newly acquired rights of citizens such as the RTI, moving ever so cautiously to keep the hotheads in his ideological family on a tight leash. That, in sum, ladies and gentlemen, has been Modi's mixed record in his first year in office. What will determine his trajectory from now on will depend partly on how swiftly and effectively his policies get implemented on the ground, and partly on how the opposition parties will undercut him. The BJP's rout in the Delhi elections was a nasty reminder that the party can't afford an iota of smug satisfaction. It cannot also snigger at Rahul Gandhi's belated but vigorous offensive in the past few weeks as something of no consequence. The party's mettle will be tested in elections in several states. In populist Bihar to begin with, a setback here would give Modi and Amit Shah sleepless nights. A victory, however, would be a shot in the arm. Either way, Modi, to perform well over the next 4 years, will have to acknowledge two basic characteristics about India. Indians want economic growth, but they also want safety nets for the most vulnerable sections of society. Indians want to celebrate their multi-layered identity, but they do not want this identity to be defined by vote bank politics, whether it concerns the minorities or the majority. Both the votaries of self-serving secularism, and I measure my words, self-serving secularism, which means one that may have fetched votes for the party, but few tangible benefits to the minorities, and the equally self-serving ideology of Hindutva, one that avowedly seeks to recast Indian nationalism along highly polarized lines. Both of these are at odds with the spirit of the Constitution. So that's the bum fact that Mr. Modi will have to reckon with. Will he? When he do that, it's too early to say. One thing though is absolutely clear to me. There is never going to be a dull moment with Narendra Modi at the helm of affairs. And the best we can do in these circumstances is to keep our fingers crossed and wish India all the best. Thank you very much.